covering the world of professional wrestling. This is the Signature Spot with Chris Toplak.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Signature Spot with Chris Toplak. As always, I greatly appreciate your ongoing support. It's been a busy week. This is a bit of a bonus episode, by the way. In case you missed it, within an hour of Fyter Fest concluding, I recorded a podcast. It was 13 minutes in length. It was a full show review covering the results, give you my take on the entire event. It's available on my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/The Signature Spot. Also available on all podcast platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spreaker, and podcast apps such as Overcast. Also, in case you missed it, Raw this week, at least I thought, was pretty solid. So go back and catch the replay. It's going to take months to fully gauge the effectiveness of Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff, which, by the way, last week I posted the episode, and of course there's breaking news, bombshells, that Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff will now be the executive producers of Raw and SmackDown, respectively. And I thought, of course, right after the show is posted, I remain optimistic on what both of them can do. I believe the Raw this week had a lot of influence from Paul Heyman. Eric Bischoff hasn't taken over SmackDown just yet. Apparently, that's going to transpire after Extreme Rules, but I'm very hopeful on the future. Today, the main focal point, the Mid-Year Awards 2019. I am joined by Ryan Boman of thegorillaposition.com. We will be dishing out awards for Male Wrestler of the Year, Female Wrestler of the Year, Feud of the Year, Match of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, Breakout Star of the Year, and Event of the Year, and it includes all promotions. So without further ado, let's get to that conversation right now. I want to know if you agree or disagree with our picks. Let us know on social media.
Our topic of the week.
I know it's hard to believe, but we are already midway through 2019, and rather than wait until the very tail end of the year, let's dish out some mid-year awards. And who better to join me than the individual who actually joined me for a good portion of the end of the year awards for 2018, Ryan Boman from thegorillaposition.com. It's a pleasure to have you on the show yet again.
It's always good to be with you, Chris. We've had it's been kind of an up and down, crazy start of 2019.
Has been.
I'm looking forward to the second half of the year, but let's take a look back at the best and maybe even some of the worst of 2019.
So we're not handing out the worst awards, but that being said, that doesn't mean that we have to highlight and then maybe have some lowlights as well too. But that being said, you're right. It's been a very
dishonorable mentions thrown in. You just never know.
That's true. It's been a very intriguing year. Of course, we've had the emergence of AEW. We have new executive producers on Raw and SmackDown. That hasn't really been in full effect yet, but it'll be interesting to see where this conversation lands in December of 2019.
Yeah, I think it's so funny. It seems like in just the last few weeks, everything of the landscape has changed. If you look, and I just said this to my business partner, Michael Melkor, our executive editor, I said, if you look at wrestling at the start of the year in January and where it is now, it's been a pretty roller coaster last 6 months.
Oh, has been. Now, what's funny about this is we never interact ahead of time. I like to go on the fly. I did give you the categories, but you were choosing them. We do not know who the other is choosing, and you normally say that we tend to agree on everything. This will be a time, I'm just predicting, where we are going to have very different choices.
We've got 8 categories. I'll be interested to see in how many of them we either agree or are close on.
Okay, so I'm going to start. For Male Wrestler of the Year, my pick, I even have a runner-up. My pick is Will Ospreay. The reason why, he's had 3 5-star matches in 2019 so far, which is absolutely incredible to consider. He had that one against Shingo. He had the one against Dragon Lee, which was one of my favorites from Dominion. And then, of course, against Bandito just recently. So he's had a truly phenomenal year in 2019 so far. He's really stepped up in New Japan as well.
I have to tell you, his performance in the ring has been fantastic. However, I look to his recent nemesis as the top wrestler of the first 6 months of the year. I got to give it to Seth Rollins for carrying WWE at a time when Roman Reigns still hasn't gotten back to full speed, for defeating Brock Lesnar, and for, quite frankly, being a workhorse for that company, in a company where there just aren't that many guys that can carry the load like that. I think Seth's had a brilliant first 6 months of the year, but again, you couldn't go wrong with Ospreay either.
How about a runner-up? I have one that may surprise you, but my runner-up is Daniel Bryan, and the reason why: WWE World Champion, Tag Team Champion, and arguably one of the best heels in the business today.
And my runner-up, ironically, probably would have been Will Ospreay, because you're right. I mean, his technical brilliance at this point, I don't know if we've ever seen anybody quite put it all together like he has, especially in the first half of this year.
Not to put over another podcast, but he did recently appear on the Pod of Awesomeness. That's with Edge and Christian. Very intriguing look into his life and really how everybody started to leave New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he figured, this is my opportunity to really make a name for myself and step up, and that he has.
Yeah, I first saw him. He had a couple brilliant matches a few years ago with Ricochet, and now it's amazing to see how far those two young guys have come since then.
Female Wrestler of the Year. I believe I know your pick, because it's probably going to be the same as mine. Who's your top pick, Ryan?
I mean, I think she's the best female wrestler in the world right now, Tessa Blanchard.
My pick as well.
With the belt, without the belt, she is Mrs. Impact Wrestling. I mean,
she's
Miss Impact Wrestling right now, because let's be honest, when you start naming Impact wrestlers, very rarely, very rarely do you hear a female come out of the first 1 or 2, 3 names mentioned. But if you mention Impact Wrestling, you got to mention Tessa Blanchard. She's kind of their franchise player.
She is. And leaving her mark all over the world, I may add, even competing against male competitors and defeating them. It's incredible.
Yeah, and of course, she was in the headlines earlier this year, not by her own making, but when Eli Drake refused to be a part of the intergender match and actually got his release because of it. You got a former world champion they let go over not wanting to wrestle her. That tells you the value of that. There may have been other factors, but it tells you the value of Tessa Blanchard, that, hey, we're putting her in this star-making position, and they want everybody else to play ball with it.
You would imagine WWE has got to be throwing over so much money in her direction, not only because of the legacy standpoint, but just the fact that she is so damn good. Like, she makes Becky Lynch look like a bit of a step down at the moment.
Absolutely. And if the Access TV stories are true, she may have a chance to show those skills if she stays in Impact on an even higher platform. And I think Tessa, honestly, that's the only thing that's missing for her, is more exposure and a greater reach, because anybody who sees her, you'd have to be blind not to know she's a star.
How about your runner-up?
Honestly, I hate to keep coming back to storyline accomplishments, but what Becky accomplished this year in terms of a character and in WWE, if I'm going pure wrestling, I'm going with Tessa. But if I'm going it based on character alone and character development, then it would be Becky Lynch.
That's who I had too. The champ. Of course, she won both championships at WrestleMania. Based on that alone, you almost have to put her as at least the runner-up here.
Absolutely. I mean, and the fact that they're headlining pay-per-views now, she's a big part. As much as they play up this women's revolution thing, there really is, take away all the PR and the marketing away from it, but there really has been a women's revolution in wrestling. And that's because of the girls, not because of the ladies, not because of anything the company's branding or marketing. It's because they've just gotten that much better.
Feud of the year. I had a tough time choosing my runner-up, but I actually have a top pick. Would love to know who you went with.
I'm going to start with my runner-up first. I originally was going to go with Seth and Brock, because they've carried this on very well through WrestleMania, and now with Brock getting the Money in the Bank briefcase. I wouldn't say it's necessarily been great, but it's definitely lingered. It's been a long-term feud. But my feud of the year this year is AEW versus WWE.
There you go.
I mean, in all seriousness, what feud in wrestling are most people talking about? It's the feud between the promotions. It's this upcoming battle we're going to have, and just the little chirping that's gone back and forth. For me, it's been more exciting than any wrestling storyline.
It's a swerve, bro. They're both together, bro. Put on your tinfoil hat. Call the world flat. That's, of course, a Vince Russo call saying that AEW and WWE are working together, which is absolutely preposterous, by the way.
Yes, and let's not invoke his name anymore during the broadcast, if possible.
That's a bad juju, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll give you my pick, and I think that this is a clear-cut winner in my eyes just because I was so captivated by it. Daniel Bryan versus Kofi Kingston.
It was a great one. It was a great one. Maybe it's just me, but after all the feel good and the love and everything else, I'm still, and he's great at it. I just still can't see Daniel Bryan as a heel. He's just too likable to me. Even when he cuts the terrible, horrible promos and puts down the people, I still like the guy. So it's hard for me to get behind too many, blood feuds with him. But I do think in terms of athleticism, those two guys are two of the best in the world. Obviously, we know Daniel, before he got hurt, was probably the best technician on the planet. And even now hasn't lost much of a step. So that's an excellent choice between the two of them. Great matches. Yeah, you're going to always get a 4 to 5 star performance from those two guys.
Especially those final minutes at Elimination Chamber. I believe, quite arguably, the best couple of minutes from any match in 2019.
The Chamber match brought out real emotion in me, which is rare for a guy who sees so many hours of wrestling in a week. And we all become kind of, ambivalent or kind of, it becomes stale to us after a while. For me to actually have my heart pumping and blood flowing, hoping that Kofi was going to pull it off, he for some reason just captured everyone's imagination. And most of it started right there from that moment.
When we chatted towards the tail end of 2018, I mentioned his name quite a bit to the point where you thought, do you have a crush on the guy? What's the deal? But my runner-up is Kota Ibushi in Naito. It's been a great feud in New Japan.
Yeah, and it's gotten ugly. It's one of those great bitter rivalries, one of those feuds that's gotten personal and ugly. And, that's something that for many years we didn't see in Japanese wrestling. A whole lot of really personal feuds. And there was always a lot more of a sport element to Japanese wrestling, and the audiences were very different. Now it seems like we're seeing almost an American-style feud between the two of them.
Who's going to break the other's neck first? Right? I think that's what it comes down to is I don't want to beat you. I want to hurt you. I want to put you out of your misery. And I love that raw emotion.
Well, considering the rash of bad injuries we've had because of strong style, let's hope nobody gets their neck broken.
Yeah, I could do without seeing a German suplex on the edge of the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. Or any falls on the edge of the ring.
I know.
Just any
Darby Allin, right?
Stage dives. Yeah, the Darby Allin kind of stage dive or whatever that was there.
Coffin
crowd
drop.
Dive. Yeah, it was just awful.
How apropos is that name, the coffin drop? Because after that, I thought, can somebody please check his pulse?
Yeah, or get him a wheelchair.
Yeah. Match of the year. Who's your top choice? We have many great candidates, many viable candidates here in the first 6 months of 2019, heading into month number 7 here.
I'm of the belief, I guess I prescribe to the Al Snow thing of whatever draws the most money. But in this case, to me, whatever has the greatest impact, whatever match to me has the biggest impact. There's a lot of 5-star matches out there. Meltzer's handing out 5 stars like it's Kool-Aid now. But the match for me of the year that I will always remember about 2019 is Cody versus Dustin.
Yeah, we touched about emotion, right? And really pick out a moment. And Steve Austin even noted this on his podcast when he interviewed Tony Khan, but he doesn't recall a more emotional moment over the past several years than that one. I tend to agree as well.
Yeah, I think it sets the tone for what you're hoping their product will be like. Obviously, you can't have matches like that up and down the card. You have to build that story arc. You have to have, this one had a natural built-in story between two brothers. But to be able to pull it off and tell the story in the ring like that is very rare. And I'm hoping that we keep getting gems like that from AEW when they go full-time to television.
Agreed. So my pick, yes, it was a bit of a spot fest, but I'm going to go with Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole, 2 out of 3 falls match. It was NXT TakeOver New York.
Yeah, that would have been my pick. I didn't like the length. Something about NXT at this point, I cannot deal with all the false finishes. Over and over and over again. It's starting to get to be the same formula. That is one thing that I've taken. A lot of Gargano matches where I would say, yes, this is definitely my favorite match. And then it goes about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes too long. And about 6 or 7 too many false finishes. That one left that sort of taste in my mouth. Like, they could have went home a lot sooner. But there's nothing wrong with that match. I mean, that's my personal preference. But anybody who watched it and said that's the match of the year, I wouldn't have a problem with. I'll give it my silver medal.
Sure. My runner-up is a tie. You mentioned it. I'm going to go first. Will Ospreay and Dragon Lee. I really fell in love with that match. And then also, of course, Cody versus Dustin at Double or Nothing.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any replacing that emotion, and especially on the first night out where we were all, and truly that should have been the main event of the show. They should have went home with that match. But that's what I think we were all hoping for from All Elite Wrestling, and at least in this one case, they delivered it like gangbusters.
Tag team of the year. Who are you going with here?
And I'm going to do the same thing I did with Tessa because of their value to their organization and because their money every time out there. I'm giving it to LAX.
There you go. Good choice. I'm going with a team that has competed against LAX on multiple occasions, and that is the Lucha Bros, who in fact defeated LAX to win the Impact World Tag Team Championship, also recaptured their AAA World Tag titles several weeks ago at the hands of the Young Bucks. They're my clear-cut winner.
And those were my 1 and 2.
Good call. How about my runner-up, actually, Gorillas of Destiny. 5-time, take a breath, 5-time champs. IWGP, that is.
The Gorillas of Destiny, unfortunately, are a team that I haven't got to see enough of. I have seen them.
Great.
They are great. But unfortunately, I didn't see enough of them this year, or what they've done all this year, to put them in my running. So I had to go with, I guess I kind of wimped out on that one and said, well, I mean, it's sort of like the Tessa answer. You can probably almost always put LAX in that top 2 or 3.
You can.
In the world. Yeah.
Depends on the incarnation of them as well, too. I mean, LAX has been around the block with multiple members. They've always been strong all the way back to, when did they start off? About probably like mid to late 2000s there. It was like 2006, 2007, I think they were there with Homicide. Even then they were strong with him and Hernandez, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. I was just looking up, who all had been in LAX today. It was for something totally different. But yeah, going back to, I guess, 14 years ago, or it's early.
Forever.
Yeah, it was 2005, 6, something like that.
Yeah.
At the time that it was formed. But yeah, you go through and, I mean, even to the point that briefly Low-Key was in the group. They had Diamante. That's been a pretty nice lineage. But I think that LAX, this incarnation of the team, is the one that everyone's going to remember when it's all said and done.
Best on interviews. Gold on the microphone. Who's your top pick?
I'd love to give this to a wrestler, but every time Paul Heyman goes out there, he owns the crowd. I mean, I think he's the king of the prize. It's sad that there isn't an in-ring performer right now that you can put in his category, but I got to give it to Heyman.
Jim Ross compared MJF to a young Paul Heyman. If I'm giving it to a wrestler, even though we haven't seen a lot from him, I'm probably leaning towards an MJF just because he's had such a strong start to 2019 and really a true heel. Like, he's the Miz on steroids, not literally, but on the microphone, he just really can get under your skin. He does such an effective job of it.
Well, see, I might be tipping my hand here, but I was thinking MJF, but gave it to Heyman because I didn't want to give multiple awards to one guy.
Oh,
that might be a preview of what's next.
Runner up, do you have one? Because I'm going to go with another wrestler, to me, just because I feel he's been so incredible this year on the microphone, Daniel Bryan.
That's another guy that, again, maybe it's because of the likability factor. I'd have to go, my runner-up would be MJF. And if you hadn't asked me right now to pick who the best promo guy is in terms of wrestlers right now, and in terms of what kind of potential we might in the next 3 to 6 months see him develop into, or the next year, we don't know how good this kid's going to get because he's just a kid. Let's be honest. So I'd say I had a hard time picking between Heyman and MJF. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's throw another wild card in there. How about a Samoa Joe? He's as believable as it comes on the microphone, too.
Or Cody. Cody's
Yeah, that's
great
true.
at owning the crowd. I mean, some people have criticized Cody's wrestling. I don't see it. I think he's a storyteller in the
Solid
ring,
hand.
as opposed to a spot maker. He's a storyteller, and I think he's a storyteller on the mic too. And I definitely put him in the top 5 of promos right now.
Breakout star of the year. I think I can already guess who it's going to be on your end.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I don't even know if I have a runner up. Is there anybody else? I guess, there's a handful of guys, but I mean, come on. Is there anybody else, any other young guy who has burst on the scene this year that more people are talking about than MJF?
23 years old too.
My wife and kids have watched him on TV, and they're not even into. They don't know anything about AEW, and they're not really. They haven't gotten involved with the show. They like it, what they've seen. But the one guy that they all just gravitate to when he's on the screen, they stop and watch, is MJF.
Do you think the WWE is going to back up the Brinks trucks at some point and try and pick up this guy? Because if they're smart, they'll let AEW build him up for, say, like a year or two, because he'll gain exposure on television on a national scale and then bring him over. That'd be a big move.
Well, I would say since WWE's handing out 5-year contracts, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and offer MJF a 5-year deal. He's not going to, at the end of 5 years, he's still not even going to be 30 years old yet.
No, he's
Most
28.
They don't make their name until they're in their 30s. This kid will be a mega star by the time he's 30. He might be the biggest name in wrestling in the next 10 years. But we don't know. I mean, his potential is limitless, and we've seen it already now that, he's getting that platform. He's only been seen a handful of times by the audience, really. I mean, other than the dieharders like us that have seen him in MLW and other places. But for the mainstream wrestling audience, he's only been seen a couple of times, and he's already being talked about. Imagine what he's going to be like on prime time on TNT.
Remarkable upside. Now, here's another name to throw out, even though he is established, perhaps not on a national scale, but he's getting there. Adam Page, Hangman.
Page is definitely, I think he's going to be that guy that they'll always have that little rivalry in AEW, because they kind of started off at odds with each other. They could do the Steamboat and Flair thing where they're friends sometimes and they're enemies and rivals other times, but there's always that respect there. I do love the program. I love the fact that MJF's throwing everything in the kitchen sink against, calling him Seabiscuit and everything else, So I'm loving that program. That's part of one of the strengths I think AEW has, is they do have some young guys that when the audience finally sees them, as I've said 2 or 3 times, some of their young performers. Allie's another person I think will be a big star on TV because the audience will fall in love with it. It's just they've got some marketable kids, and certainly that's 2 of them right there, Paige and obviously MJF is the youngest of all of them. But yeah, I mean, they've got a potential of just breakout stars, one right after the other. They've got some people that are kind of crap too on the roster. I'm not going to lie that I could do without. But as far as their core, I think it's super solid, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah, they really need to focus on that young crop of talent at the moment, especially because you have individuals like Austin. In my humble opinion, when you talk about biggest stars in the history of the industry, he's either 1 or 2 with Hogan, right? And he's even putting his stamp of approval on both of those individuals, as is basically everybody. You even have people like Jim Cornette, who is totally critical of AEW, but still loves MJF and Adam Page, as does basically every fan at the moment, and every critic and journalist as well.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, even though he's a young guy, he's a very old school heel. He wants to get heat on himself. He doesn't care if you hate him or not. There's a lot of heels that try to be cool. He's not trying to be cool, which is what makes him cool. If you understand that, he's a badass, and he's proud of it, and he's not backing down from anybody. He doesn't do anything heroic. He doesn't do anything, he doesn't do anything to pander to the fans.
Exactly.
It's a breath of fresh air for a guy to be so rotten.
You will appreciate this, of course, but Jim Ross's comparison, and I mentioned that just moments ago, to a young Paul Heyman is so spot on, because if you watch Paul Heyman in AWA or in Memphis, he is just so incredibly obnoxious. Reminds me so much of MJF right now.
And oddly, and a guy that was sort of a mentor to Paulie, he reminds me of Eddie Gilbert.
Yeah.
Kind of shorter in stature, but he's got the good build and he's got the big mouth and he's cocky. And so that was my comparison. Was he kind of reminds me of a young Eddie Gilbert,
Oof.
and so, but you couldn't go wrong either way, being like Eddie or being like Paul.
No. I mean, both of those individuals were great. I mean, you and I have talked at length about Eddie Gilbert as well, too. Just the fact that he was such an incredible hand in the ring and on the microphone, had great charisma, maybe tried a little bit too hard to be Jerry Lawler. But at the same time, he had a great mind for the industry as well, too, as Paul Heyman has alluded to over the years.
Yeah, and I think they kind of played off the him wanting to be like Jerry Lawler a lot in Memphis, obviously, him wanting to win the crown from Lawler and all that stuff. And I think they may be setting up that teacher and student type rivalry with MJF and Cody eventually, because MJF kind of mimics some of Cody's style, his fashion, and everything else. I could definitely see that being a great long-term feud for AEW.
Maybe battle of the scarves between Chris Jericho and MJF, too.
There you go.
Now, we go to event of the year.
I'm going to continue to stick to more about significance as opposed to attendance figures or dollar amounts or gates or whatever you want to say, pay-per-view buys. To me, the biggest event of this year so far has been Double or Nothing. It's the biggest impact on the business, on the industry itself, just by seeing this little company launch this giant pay-per-view and have such success with it and have the whole world buzzing about it. If you want to go work rate, I'm sure we'd start with Dominion. You can go through any of the New Japan shows, any of the NXT shows, but in terms of its total overall importance to pro wrestling, I'm going Double or Nothing.
Great choice. I actually don't have it on my list. That may surprise you. But what may not surprise you is a promotion that is my favorite and I believe the best in the world. I'm even going to take it one step further, Ryan. I thought about this the other day. My all-time favorite promotion, NXT, which is shocking. I know. Like, think about the fact that I've been watching wrestling since the time I legitimately took my first steps in the world, since I can remember about 3 or 4, and NXT is my favorite. That's why I have to go with the damn near flawless NXT TakeOver New York. You had the War Raiders taking on Aleister Black and Ricochet. Highly emotional, great match. Velveteen Dream defeating Matt Riddle. Such an underrated match. Walter, Pete Dunne, you had Shayna Baszler defending against Io Shirai, Bianca Belair, Kairi Sane, and of course Johnny Gargano, Adam Cole in that 2 out of 3 falls match. You look at those 5 matches and think, can it get any better than that?
Now, I would say that's the wrestling card of the year, but I do want to stress to you, you said event of the year.
That's true.
That's why I thought the Double or Nothing thing out. Let's be honest. Up and down that card.
Yeah.
That show had the best wrestling matches, from tip to tail, as I like to say, from the very beginning to the very end. The NXT card is superior. I guess I'm looking more at what am I going to look back
the spectacle,
5 years
right?
from now on? Yeah. And say, what was the most important thing? What was the most important event? And I think I'll look back and say, it has to be that little shindig out in Vegas.
Well, and of course, you've heard individuals like Kurt Angle mention this as well, too. Kurt Angle, of course, a wrestling machine. We can agree upon that, but he cares about the moments just as much as the matches. So I can understand why Double or Nothing would top your list. And of course, you can understand why NXT TakeOver New York tops mine. Although my runner-up, which I thought was very underappreciated at the time, completely exceeded expectations, was NXT TakeOver 25. Now, the fact that I love NXT TakeOver, I went into this with somewhat lukewarm expectations. I knew it was going to be really solid. I did not expect it to be that good. Like Matt Riddle versus Roderick Strong blew me away. The Street Profits blew me away. Velveteen Dream and Tyler Breeze. Adam Cole defeating Johnny Gargano. That was a moment. And of course, Shayna Baszler defeating Io Shirai. I thought that was a very underappreciated card.
That was one of the few times that TakeOver, as you said, people weren't just licking their chops. I think they were a little underwhelmed by the lineup. And then, as usual, they go out and just put on a superior in-ring product. And one thing you can book, I think, at this point is if it says TakeOver on the marquee, you're in for a night full of excitement and entertainment. I don't think I've watched. No, I know. I can say it's, without a doubt, I've never watched a TakeOver event and been disappointed.
No, I've always said death, taxes, and an incredible TakeOver event. These 3 things in life are guaranteed.
at our age soon prostate exams.
Oh, jeez. I want to try and avoid those as much as possible.
Which are not nearly as much fun as an NXT takeover event.
Oh, God. You know you're getting old when you're talking to your friends about prostate exams, the weather, or cutting grass. That becomes a pretty prominent topic.
Yeah, or stretch waistband slacks because, you need that extra room.
Is that a zit or a boil? That's another big discussion piece as well.
Yeah, so, we're about 20 or so years away from that, I think.
I'm knocking on as much wood as I can. So we will reconvene towards the very tail end of 2019 to see if these picks hold up or if they're completely different. Based on the current landscape, I feel as though we may have some very different picks within the next 6 months.
Yeah, as I said earlier, if you looked at January to now, how many things have changed in the professional wrestling business. If you had said in January, hey, AEW is going to sell out a couple shows in less than 10 minutes and they're going to do great buy rates and they're going to have a TV show at the end of the year. Oh, and by the way, Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff are back. Somebody would have tried to put you in a rubber room with a nice big oversized jacket on.
And based on what I read too, Paul Heyman and Vince actually had a very respectful relationship on this past edition of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, it seems to me like so many forces are taking shape that I have no doubts that at the end of the year, probably 6 out of 8 of my picks will have changed by the time we get to December.
That's going to be fun. Completely irrelevant in the next 6 months. But Ryan, thanks as always for joining me on this mid-year award edition of The Signature Spot.
Chris, it's always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack.
Yet another great conversation with Ryan Boman, editor-in-chief of thegorillaposition.com, a great partner of the program. They tell the stories of pro wrestling's storytellers, so stop by today to read some great featured articles, news, and opinion pieces from Ryan and the entire crew. Now, something that's been very humbling is the fact that this show is growing on a worldwide scale. In fact, there's been a strong contingent of fans tuning in from Russia, Ireland, and Mexico. Pretty incredible. And if you would be so kind, keep leaving that feedback. 5-star reviews, message me on social media, keep spreading the word. It's all that I ask. And if you would be so kind, tell your friends, family, and fellow wrestling fans to tune in on a weekly basis. And until next Thursday, happy trails to you until we meet again.
This concludes another episode of The Signature Spot with Chris Toplack. For new episodes, subscribe on YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, or iTunes. And don't forget to follow The Signature Spot on Facebook for exclusive clips, polls, and opinions.